Rachel here from the Confused Millennial, and this week is my birthday. And it's not any birthday, it's my 30th birthday. And I don't know how I feel about it. So I know a lot of people get really weirded out when they're turning 30. It's like, oh no, I'm getting older. When we're little kids, 30 can seem so old. Like dig my grave, get ready to just put me 10 feet under. And I definitely don't think that's the case at all. I think I'm like a little bit melancholy about it just because I loved my 20s so much. And the idea of turning 30, everyone says it's the best decade and all those things, and I'm really excited about that. I guess I just am not somebody that likes the unknown. When I turned 20, that was really challenging for me. I turned 20 days after my dad died, and it happened to be Father's Day that year. And so that day was obviously full of a lot of tears, and not just because of what was happening in my life in that moment, but because up until that point, I don't know that I really believed I would even make it to 20 years old. I had spent my teens struggling with depression, anxiety, abusing drugs, alcohol, struggling with disordered eating, and the fact that I lived to be 20 just kind of shocked me and surprised me. And then all of a sudden to be in this defining decade without somebody that had truly loved me unconditional obviously was just frosting on the unfortunate cupcake. I guess fortunate because I was alive. But I didn't know what to expect in my 20s. My early 20s were still dealing with a lot of the consequences of my choices and actions from my teen years. I had started therapy, thankfully, when I was in my teens. I had quit all the substances in my teens. So by the time I had turned 20, I was already a couple years removed from that lifestyle that I had been living that had led to so many consequences. But I mean, you do a lot of damage. It takes a lot of time to heal it all. And when I entered my 20s, I thought that I'd be on my medication for the rest of my life, that I would be struggling with depression and anxiety for the rest of my life. I wasn't sure if I would ever find a partner in life that would accept me. I wasn't sure if I would ever accept myself. And I mean, even as recently as 2 years ago, I remember being in a workshop and we had to go up to somebody, and the way that we had to introduce ourselves was with our greatest fear in life. Not our name, not where we're from, not what we do, but our greatest fear in life. And I remember people were like, I'm afraid of heights, da 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 da. And I remember walking into my group and being like, I'm afraid that I'll never let love in. And yes, I'm married and I have an amazing husband and I love him so much, but because I was still struggling to love myself, I never really could feel or fully embrace that love. And I remember everyone in the group kind of just like looked at me like, oh my God, did somebody give me a hug? Nobody said anything. And they all quickly changed their fears from heights to much more real ones. And it kind of reminds me like going into my 30s of that whole TED Talk by Meg Jay about your 20s being the defining decade. And, you know, I've been saying for like the last few weeks, like I'm really sad to leave my 20s. I loved my 20s so much. They were so great. They were so transformative. So many amazing things happened. And I realize so much of that is because of like what she talks about in that TED Talk. You know, when I was younger, like before 25, I always held on to the fact that your brain is still forming itself into its most hardwired. And now I think that you can change who you are. I think that you can change the wiring in your brain no matter what age you are. It's just a lot easier before you turn 25 and it goes through that last big growth spurt. And I remember so often just being so grateful. I was having so many of the experiences I was having so early on because I was like, that's great. I can rebound quicker. I can figure this out. I can hit the reset button and handle things so much more steadfastly. I don't know if that's the right word. But I gave myself so much grace with that because I was like, okay, let me hurry up, get all of this done. Let me get my hands dirty. Let me really look at who I am. Let me own who I am. Let me pick apart every flaw and not shame it, although I did shame it a lot in the process, but not sit in that shame and just like rip as many band-aids off as possible. And in that process, I definitely ostracized a lot of people in my life. I know I definitely was not the easiest person to be around at times, but a lot of the choices I made allowed my 20s to truly be that defining decade she talks about. She says somewhere in that TED Talk that your personality changes the most, like more often, most frequently in your 20s. And I think that was definitely true for me at times, although I think my teen years, I definitely may have given my 20-something self a run for her money. But I started off my 20s finishing my undergrad degree on a path that society had laid out for me. I was getting a degree in psychology. I clearly took the next step in getting a master's in counseling and thinking like, okay, let me do one thing after the other. I'll get the degree in counseling. I'll work somewhere until I'm able to get my license. I'll start my own private practice. And I was kind of just putting all of the stepping stones, one right in front of the other, on the map that somebody else had painted. And when I was 24, I really knew in the middle of my master's program that it wasn't right for me, but I was white knuckling it because I didn't know what other path was going to be available to me. And I ended up getting fired twice in 1 month, with a month after I turned 25. And so my quarter life crisis was very, very real. And that month of getting fired twice kind of gave me pause. You know, a former colleague had reached out to me and offered me another job on the phone without me even offering. He just heard I was available, and I said no. And that was probably like one of those big pivotal turning moments for me, because all of a sudden I was going off of the map that had been laid out before me, and I was just figuring out who I was and taking these really big steps. And I had built up an emergency fund from my waitressing days. I had waitressed all while having my 9-to-5 as a counselor. And those 2 months where I just lived off of my emergency fund and figured out what it is I wanted in life completely changed my path. I ended up writing out a life skills curriculum that I taught locally via workshops, teaching financial skills, vocational skills, relationships, grocery shopping, healthy eating, kind of like all of the adulting things that I had been going through a crash course in up until that point in my 20s. It was really like, here's everything I've been going through and needed help with, and this is what I learned. And then after doing that for a year, teaching it in person, one-on-one, and in group settings, I realized it wasn't a scalable business model, so I decided I was going to move things online as a digital career and business coach, and hired a business coach and was so excited, only to realize that once again, I was building somebody else's dream. And so about a couple months into that, I remember just crying to my then boyfriend, now husband, and being like, I'm just another confused millennial who has no idea what they're doing with their life. And like that, it was as if a lightning bolt hit me. I grabbed my laptop, I typed in Confused Millennial into Namecheap, and I saw that the domain was available, and I bought it. And 2 days later, I had a live website with a logo and 4 published blog posts. And 2 months later, I had over 20,000 page views. And 2 years later, I had generated over 6 figures from it. And it was just this happy snowball effect in the best way possible, had I not listened to what my gut was saying. And that change in my career has really kind of defined things. So like going into my 30s, I'm excited and I don't know what's possible. And yes, at any given moment I could lose it all, but I also developed this grit to know that everything is going to be okay, because even when my back is up against a wall, I will know how to get myself out of that situation in a way that aligns the most with my soul. And so I would say, like, if there is a fear about turning 30 that's been coming up, it is kind of feeling like I'm irrelevant. As the Confused Millennial, I get a lot of pitches from brands and news outlets that are trying to reach what they think a millennial is, and oftentimes those are targeting young college students. And millennials, the youngest of them at the date of this recording, are really around like 23-ish, 1996, the oldest year that's classified as a millennial. And so like nobody's really an undergrad anymore. That's not like the target majority of the demographic. Most are in their late 20s and turning 30, or if not already 30. And so I have this kind of fear, and I had somebody recently comment on my blog post about the meaning behind my blog name. They were like, I get the whole confused thing, but how are you a millennial? You know, you essentially, like, you seem too old to be a millennial. And I'm like, well, it's actually an age range, not just your early 20s. And there's this kind of like breakdown. So I had this fear about becoming irrelevant. I guess that's kind of why I liked my 20s, is because you're allowed to constantly reinvent yourself. People haven't quite put you into a box yet. You were once an angsty teenager, adolescent, and then you were a career person, and then you probably had your love life a mess, and you probably changed your friends a bunch of times, and it's just this really fun decade of constantly getting to play dress up where people don't necessarily have expectations of you because you only have potential. You haven't really shown the world anything yet. Whereas your 30s, maybe there are expectations still about you. Maybe there is more room for me to quote unquote fail, even though I don't believe in failure. I think everything's just a step forward into the unknown that we don't know yet, and we can choose to let that bury us, or we can choose to evolve and grow from it and come back even better. I've typically always chosen the latter, thankfully. Anyway, so that's kind of like the career side of things. And then, you know, when I was 22 is when I met my now husband, and I was fortunate that as big of a mess as I was in so many ways in my teens and everything, after I got dumped for the first time when I was 15 years old, my mom handed me the rules, and Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, two very, very outdated dating relationship books that today would probably be burned by feminists and all that stuff. Literature, if you will, if you can even call it literature. Anyway, but they taught me a lot about dating, and at that time, you know, over 15 years ago, they taught me a lot about self-worth and self-respect into that culture. Today, there's probably way better books out there. I don't recommend reading them. But essentially, they ended up teaching me all these different things that allowed me to enter into relationships, that and being sober, allowed me to enter into relationships throughout my 20s that really valued myself and taught people how I wanted to be treated, both romantically and in friendships and in relationships. And while that wasn't always easy and that wasn't always pretty, it allowed me and gave me space to advocate for myself. And so when we talk about your 20s being this defining decade, and I think that's why I'm kind of sad to see them go, is because I feel really proud of the person I started out as and the person I'm ending them as. And I don't think we often enough publicly recognize ourselves and our growth. Like, even as I said, I feel really proud of that, of the person I've become in my 20s. In my head, I'm like, well, you know, there is that girl that could totally leave a mean comment with a terrible story of me. And I'm not saying that I was perfect in my 20s by any means. I still had flaws. I still got into sticky situations just like everybody else did. I mean, I didn't talk to my mom for most of my 20s at all. And if you ask her, it's because of one thing. If you ask me, it's because of another thing. But those were choices I made where somebody else would have kind of just swallowed their pride or gone into people pleasing or dulled their truth in order to keep the peace. And that's not who I've been in my 20s. If something's going to ruffle people's feathers, but it feels in alignment with me, I've been willing to take that risk, and I've been willing to piss people off. And a lot of people would say that's selfish, but what I learned in my 20s is that selfish. I remember growing up as a kid and being an only child, I would hear I'm selfish a lot. And I took it to become this dirty word. And then I remember a year ago, I was working with Shaman Durek, and he had looked at my energy alchemy, and he's like, you are actually here to be selfish. Like, that's okay for you. And I remember it was the biggest deep breath of my life, because I had so much angsty energy around this word because it had been thrown at me so often like a curse word. And I realized that to be selfish isn't a bad thing. If we're agitating other people, it's because there's more growth for them to do too. Like, if me choosing to say, no, I don't want to see you today is bringing up feelings of rejection and things like that in you, then that's more work for you to do. And I know so many people disagree with that sentiment, and I feel like a short YouTube video, I'm probably going to do a podcast episode on it just because it's so much to unpack, and I feel like a short YouTube video is not going to do it justice. But I think too often we like to shift blame outside of ourselves. Like, I'm responding like this because this person did this, or I'm only acting selfish because this person doesn't really care or see me. And we label somebody as selfish just because we don't agree or understand where they're coming from. And so I think the big thing for me in my 20s has been giving myself space to understand who I am, which has seemed selfish and has been selfish, but not in a bad way. So that in my 30s, one of my hopes is that having taken the time to understand who I am and how that's constantly evolving and constantly changing, that I can then use that to teach others how to understand who they are, and we can all work to understand one another. Because I think at the end of the day, so many problems, so much depression, so much anxiety, all of these things come from a place of misunderstanding ourselves and one another. And there's just this constant break in communication. And we have to kind of take the power away from inflammatory labels like selfish and things like that in order to move to this place of understanding and holisticness. And so, you know, as I'm like closing out my 20s, I think the reason I keep talking about this whole defining decade and like this fear of the unknown in my 30s is because like on paper, I hit all of the milestones you're supposed to hit, and which I'm proud of. You know, I bought my first house, I got married, I had a baby, I started my own company. Like I've done all these amazing different things, and I'm excited to see how I get to pick the fruits from all of that work. And I say work as like a beautiful, fun thing, not like as a hard thing, but all of my actions paying off into like harvesting the fruit, if you will, into my 30s. Tips if you're in your 20s. Don't worry about pissing people off. You know, as long as what you're doing isn't causing harm to yourself. And I really kind of stress that. If you're not drinking, if you're not drugging, if you're not engaging in high-risk behaviors that have serious negative consequences that have this larger ripple effect, you're not stealing, you're not unemployed, like you're a contributing member to society in a good way, don't worry about living up to what other people's expectations are of you, or what you expect from yourself. Don't worry if you piss somebody off because you don't want to go out that day, or you piss somebody off because you just don't want them in your life for that period, because right now you need an extended self-care. Because let's be honest, a 20-minute bubble bath isn't going to cure the conditioning we picked up from childhood. And so I say, like, do that. Allow your 20s to be selfish, to create the best life that you want to create and reach those milestones, whatever milestones that you want to reach them. Don't let somebody cheat on you. Don't let a friend get away with never calling you back. Or, you know, I lost a couple friends this decade because while I was very transparent and honest with them, they were kind of always hiding behind walls or deflecting and not really getting to a vulnerable place in our relationships. And I'm a Cancer sun in astrology. I need that vulnerability. I crave that vulnerability, and those types of relationships just weren't working for me anymore. Are they amazing people? Absolutely. Are they acquaintances? Totally. I have no hard feelings against them. But what I was looking for in friendships at that time wasn't aligned with what they could give me. And I think too often we stay in friendships, we stay in relationships, we stay in jobs because we think we're supposed to. And just because you white knuckle those things and make it to your 30s with them doesn't mean they're going to serve you. And I think that's why for some people their 30s end up really sucking, is because they've ended up, I hope I don't end up biting myself in the ass looking back on this video, but I think a lot of the times we end up white knuckling things. Like I white knuckled, I'll use my teens as an example of what I'm trying to say here. My teens, I white knuckled and stayed true to so many things that I knew were not good for me. So many belief systems that I needed to let go of, but I didn't think I was worth more. We still saw that playing out in my career in my mid-20s. I held on to it because I didn't think I was allowed to start my own business until I finished my master's, worked for a little while, got licensure, and was able to open up my own practice as a counselor. I didn't think there was another route forward. I didn't think I was worthy of finding another route forward. And so when we can go ahead and say like, no, I am worthy, let me try these different things, we give ourselves space to go ahead and evolve and set ourselves up for the greatest thing. So what I'm saying is, if you're white knuckling things just to check off the boxes on a piece of paper, I have a house, I have a job, I have a relationship, don't be surprised if they fall apart in your 30s. I was talking to a friend who, like, on her 30th birthday, she lost her fiance, she completely switched her job, like everything in her life fell apart because it wasn't in alignment with what was in her greatest good. And so if that does happen, it's totally okay. And if you're before 20, you can totally go ahead and change that. But I think there's a statistic, like 80% of our life's greatest milestones happen before the age of 35. And right now, you know, I feel like I've checked off so many of those. And I think it's worth celebrating, and I think it's also just worth reflecting on and like sharing how I've kind of done it, and not to say like, oh, I'm on a soapbox and like I think I'm so great, but like I am really proud, and I don't think we celebrate ourselves enough. I think too often we feel like we can't say we're really proud because that's boastful and it's not a good look. But when you come from turning 20 and thinking that you weren't going to live to see that age to how many blessings came from my 20s, I am going to be boastful. I am going to be proud. I am going to sing it from the rooftops, because it wasn't easy. It's not like I was sitting there on the sidelines and all these things happened. I was in therapy for years. I was in individual and group therapy for years. I was on medication. I got off medication. I've worked with shamans, astrologers, Reiki healers, tons of different types of healers, Psych K, EMDR, all these different things I've done. And so when I say all these blessings have happened, it's because I chose to take an active role in my life, and I chose to look at who I was fearlessly. And when people would give me criticism, although my gut reaction would be to say, well, you are da 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 da, and shift the blame back onto them, I actually took time and looked at all the criticism I had gotten over the years and found truth in every single piece of it and healed those truths. My 30th birthday is at the end of the week. These are the final days of my 20s, and I couldn't be more excited. I'm really excited to see what my 30s hold for me. I pray that I continue to look at myself with the same diligence. I always say, if we aren't willing, I hate when people go, oh, I'm a finished product. And my kind of like back of my head response is like, well, why are you still here taking up Earth's resources then? If you are good, if you are set, then what's the purpose of your life? And so I pray that I keep that same zest to continue to look at who I am, to continue to evolve, to continue to ask questions, to continue to be confused, because it means I'm asking questions, and taking an active role in my life. And I believe that is how I've been able to enrich my life thus far and will continue to. And so make sure you're following me on the Confused Millennial on Instagram, the blog, everywhere, podcast, to hear more. I know this is not the normal YouTube video I typically do. I typically say rants like this with the podcast, but I felt like with it being my 30th birthday, I just wanted to like go all out and celebrate this entire week across all of the channels. And documenting this moment so that when I'm turning 40, I can go back and look on it and be either laugh at myself because I was so naive, which is what older people always tell me, that my views on life were very naive, which I don't believe. I just think that I push a lot of envelopes forward, which make people uncomfortable sometimes. Or I can look back at myself and think I was really naive, like I was saying, or I can look back on myself and be like, dang, that girl was wise beyond her years. I guess more will be revealed. Till next time, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any videos.